Good afternoon, everyone. You are very welcome to this webinar, and in today's session we will examine the assessment and moderation of the Synoptic project in the subject area of engineering. Firstly though, a few introductions to put a voice and to a name. So my name is Kelly Johnson and I'm a Provider Development Officer here at NCFE. My background is vocational education and I have 15 years of experience of working in the FE sector in various roles, including a teacher, a curriculum leader and a curriculum operations manager. I do specialise mainly in the subjects of sport, health and fitness, and I've educated young people from level 1 to foundation degree level, including A levels. My role here at NCFE is to support centres through the planning, onboarding and further CPD opportunities for the NCFE qualifications, in particular the VCERT qualifications, and that's with a focus on promoting and advancing learning. I'm also really pleased to let you know that we are also joined today by Peter Groves, who is an Engineering Chief Examiner. Peter is a teacher of design and technology and also has been for engineering for 13 years. Peter has taught the current and previous qualification and has also worked for NCFE as an examiner and now as the Chief Examiner. So the plan for the webinar today is firstly to provide you with an outline of our approach to awarding for this session. There will also be an overview of the structure and delivery of the Synoptic project tasks for this year for engineering, and that will be presented by Peter. He will also provide information on the marking and grading and giving feedback to your learners. We will also detail the internal quality assurance or IQA process and the documentation that you can use, including the grading calculator, as well as resubmissions and submitting your grades to the portal. Lastly, we will provide information on the EQA support that is available to you in your centres, again, including the documentation and the process for EQA reviews, the expectations, as well as the certification process. And finally, there will be an opportunity to ask questions throughout the webinar, so please do feel free to pop them into the question box and we will try and answer them in a timely manner throughout the webinar. So before I hand over to Peter, I'd just firstly like to briefly outline what our approach is to awarding for this academic session. We have updated our assessment variation process to allow centres to use additional test centre locations. We've also adapted our assessments so that they can be delivered in line with public health guidelines. All relevant qualification content must still be delivered and assessment criteria met. To further support centres, significant adaptations have been made to the conditions of the VCERT Technical Award Synoptic project this year. So what have we done? We have adapted the delivery and completion conditions so that it can now be completed by learners remotely where required. We have removed the requirement to complete it within a set number of hours. We have also removed the requirement of it being completed in controlled conditions. And lastly, we have brought forward the release of the Synoptic project brief so that centres can plan their own delivery around their own delivery plan. So this year, or for this academic session, it was released on the 1st of November 2021. And as a reminder, learners do need to be registered and booked onto the controlled assessment so that it can be viewed and accessed. Furthermore, we've also removed the timescales around the submission deadlines, but there is a deadline for having the final grades on the portal, and this deadline is that the grades must be on the portal by the 27th of May 2022. Learners will still be able to have a resubmission opportunity, but this is to be managed internally by the centre. Learners should have the opportunity to undertake 2 submissions, so a first submission and a resubmission if applicable, but it's only the final grade that should be entered onto the portal. Grades for a learner's first submission do not need to be entered onto the portal, but assessment records should be kept up to date to provide a full audit trail of the resubmission. The EQA review deadline is before the 31st of July 2022, and this is to allow for results to be confirmed by the end of July for performance tables. I'm now going to hand over to Peter, who's going to provide you with some more detail about the Synoptic project for this year.
Thank you, Kelly. I'm now going to talk you through an overview of the structure and the delivery of the Synoptic project task for engineering. You can download all the required paperwork from the NCFE Qualification Hub website. I'd recommend that you have copies of the above documents on the screen available for your EQA to review. Assessor feedback to learner form, declaration of authority, and also copies of learner log completed by students throughout the Synoptic project to provide evidence for assessment objective 5. The project brief is focused upon a storage box for an engineering company. It has been confirmed that the product should be manufactured using the dimensions provided, but may vary slightly due to the thickness of the chosen material. The brief does state the material be chosen by the learner and based upon what is available to them in your centre. Learners should provide a portfolio which covers the 5 assessment objectives and also a learner log. The portfolio should include elements including sketches, both hand and or CAD, a production plan, evidence of testing your storage box against the criteria, an evaluation storage box against criteria also. Learners should have investigated and developed how to hinge the lid sections and ensured that the tray handle is strong enough to hold the weight of the tray whilst being removed. Over the next few slides, I'm going to talk you through marking and grading of the Synoptic project. When it comes to assessing the Synoptic project, it should be done holistically. The Synoptic project accounts for 60% of the final grade. You will be judging the project as a whole and it will be assessed against each of the assessment objectives. There are 5 assessment objectives in total assessed for the project. Each assessment objective has a different weighting. The band awarded for each assessment objective will inform the overall grade awarded for the Synoptic project. This will be the grade entered into the portal. We will show you how to calculate the final grade later in the presentation. Marking and assessment of the Synoptic project can only take place when the learner has completed and submitted their project. Remember, for this session, learners have the opportunity to make 2 submissions. The first submission must be received, marked, assessed, and sampled by the internal quality assurer before this can be returned to the learner. The learner will then have the opportunity to reset a second final submission. The opportunity to resubmit should be offered to learners who have not yet achieved an assessment objective or wish to improve their grade. Resubmissions will need to be assessed, graded, and internally quality assured again. We recommend that first submissions should be received by the end of March to provide sufficient time for marking, IQA, and resubmissions if required. I would like to remind you that AO5 is linked to the completion of the learner log and the learner's evaluation of the project, as this is a separate document. When it comes to assessing the Synoptic project, it should be done holistically. You'll be judging the project as a whole and it will be assessed against each of the assessment objectives. Descriptors have been written for each assessment objective and assessors will be using the grading descriptors to determine the banding decision for each assessment objective. The students will also be able to see these grading descriptors as they are on the Synoptic brief. There are four bands to be awarded, not yet achieved: Band 1, Band 2, and Band 3. This can give you a good idea of different qualities of work where grades have been awarded. In these documents, you will find the evidence produced by the learner, the feedback the assessor has given, and comments from the external quality assurer justifying why it has been achieved. Here is an example of a page submitted for Assessment Objective 1. When assessing this piece of work, we are marking the engineering knowledge and subject-specific terminology. You would mark all the sheets holistically, but have a think about what mark this sheet would have been awarded. This page has been awarded Band 2. The page shows a range of maths and scientific knowledge and terminology which is appropriate on occasion. Here is an example of a page submitted for AO2. When assessing this piece of work, we are marking the learner for accurately applying maths and science theory which is relevant and in context. You would mark all the sheets holistically, but have a think about what mark this sheet would have been awarded. The page was awarded Band 3. The page shows that the learner has accurately applied knowledge and understanding in context and is relevant to the situation. Here we have an example of a page submitted for AO3. When assessing this piece of work, we're again marking the learner on the ability to analysing and evaluating knowledge and understanding. You would mark all the sheets holistically, but have a think about what the mark this sheet would have been awarded. The page was awarded Band 1. The page shows a simple comments and conclusion, having responded simply to their design ideas. Here is an example of a page submitted for Assessment Objective 4. When assessing this piece of work, we are marking the learner for demonstrating and applying technical skills and processes. You would mark all the sheets holistically, but have a think about what mark this sheet would have been awarded. The page was awarded Band 3. The page shows that the learner has demonstrated and applied relevant technical skills effectively and used appropriate tools and techniques. The learner has completed an effective workable solution. Here is an example of a page submitted for AO5. When assessing this piece of work, we are marking the engineering knowledge and subject-specific terminology. You'd mark all the sheets holistically, but have a think about what mark this sheet would have been awarded. The page was awarded Band 3. The learner has shown they have evaluated a wide range of stages and approaches. Here is an example of a page submitted for AO5. When assessing this piece of work, we are marking the engineering knowledge and subject-specific terminology. You would mark all the sheets holistically, but have a think about what mark this sheet would have been awarded. The page was awarded Band 2. The page shows a range of stages evaluated in the learner log, and some approaches have also been evaluated. Here we can see how the different grades for the assessment objectives are submitted to create the overall grade which you submit for awarding. As the different AOs have different weighting, they can have a different impact upon the overall grade, from a little difference to a significant impact upon the overall grade for the learner. Looking at this piece of work, what would you think to award it using the mark scheme above? Give you a minute to have a think about that. The piece of work was submitted a Band 2. The learner has demonstrated appropriate analysis and reached suitable conclusions. Looking at this piece of work, what would you think to award it using the mark scheme above? Again, I'll give you a minute to have a think, have a look at the mark scheme and make a decision. This piece of work was submitted a band 1. The learner has demonstrated basic engineering knowledge and subject-specific knowledge, which is basic. I now want to talk you through briefly some general guidance when giving feedback and the documentation that is available to support you. Then talk you through some more specific guidance on giving feedback to your learners and provide some good practice examples. Using the grading descriptors to assist you with feedback. For example, you might say something like, you have described X, but you need to explain the importance of X. Or you have some key terminology, but you need to use the key terms more consistently throughout your work. There is another option available which is better suited to the Synoptic project, which is the grading calculator. On the third sheet of the grading calculator called the learners, there is a grid on the assessment 5 objectives and the bandings. You can copy and paste this into a different spreadsheet or Word document and use it for the feedback. You can then circle the relevant banding they achieved and write your comments for assessment. This slide will highlight good practice examples that you can use to provide effective feedback to learners. Remember, feedback should be provided to learners after the project has been sampled by your IQA. Feedback records must be maintained to review. Your EQA will ask to see feedback records as part of the EQA review. Effective feedback is developmental, constructive, providing the learner with an overview of how they have performed. A good framework to use is to identify what went well and what the learner could do to make the project even better. Effective feedback should be evidence-based. Pick out points from the learner response to highlight key areas of strength.
Thanks, Peter. That was really informative. So now I'd like to talk you through the quality assurance process, and I'm going to start with the internal quality assurance process. Peter will then pop back on and go through some things that you could consider when you are completing the IQA process that will make it easier and more effective. So the internal quality assurance stage is the final check of the Synoptic project within the centre. The internal quality assurer should be able to correctly assess and moderate the work, so therefore they would need to be knowledgeable on the content, competent on the grading system so they can challenge grading decisions, and not be involved with the teaching of the learners. If this is your first year of delivery, then we do recommend the IQA sample to be about 50% of the learner cohort. The sample should contain a wide range of learners, grades, assessors, and satellite sites if applicable. Now, after the first year of sampling, this can be reduced, and while there is no specific number on the size of the sample, it should still be large enough to give the IQA a picture of the work that has been completed by the learner, so we would therefore recommend between a 20 and 40% sample. Grades can be given to the learners after this IQA process has been completed, but you should inform the learners that this may change based on the EQA's review. Ordinarily, no feedback would be given to the learners at this stage, and feedback would be directed to the assessor. Now, those grades, when we're in a business as usual year, would need to be submitted to us by the 31st of March each year. The EQA would then sample the work and the assessment decisions and would either agree and bank the grades or reject them. Your EQA would then discuss their findings, give you a supportive action plan, and the new grades would be eventually banked for those learners. Following the EQA review, you could then give your learners feedback and they will be entitled to one resubmission. And learners would usually use the same project. They would have 21 hours to complete it at their resubmission in supervised sessions, and then the work would be assessed and internally quality assured again. The resubmission grade would normally, when it's business as usual, be with us via the portal by the 31st of May. Now, as I said, this is the process when it is business as usual, but there are adaptations in place for this session, and I'm going to go into that in a little bit more detail in the webinar when I talk through the resubmission process, and in particular what it is for this year. To determine the grade achieved for the Synoptic project, you can use the grading calculator on QualHub, which Peter has already referred to. On the grading calculator, there is a place to put the learner's external assessment grade so that you can determine their overall grade for the technical award. If you don't know their exact UMS, but you think you know what grade they will obtain based on mock exams, then you can place that in the provisional grade column. If they have sat their actual external assessment, then you can put their actual UMS score in the actual exam grade column. If you have used the provisional exam grade column, then the calculator will give you the estimated maximum and minimum grade that the learners would get. Whereas if you've used their actual external assessment grade, it will calculate their estimated actual overall grade for the level 1-2 technical award. You can also place the band that they've achieved against each assessment objective. This will then calculate the grade for the internal assessment, that is the Synoptic project. And with the example on this slide, you can see that learner A, the bands that they achieved were a 2, 2, 2, 1 and a 2, giving them an overall grade of a level 1 distinction. Whereas learner B got 2s for every assessment objective and they got a level 2 merit overall. That is the only assessment objective that learner B did better on, but as you can see, they jumped up 2 grades. And this just shows how important assessment objective 4 is in terms of its heavier weighting. On QualHub, in policies and documents, you'll find course file documents. Your EQA may recommend that you create a course file to contain all the relevant documentation and evidence that you will need when they visit or undertake a remote review. The documents and guidance on this page will show you what kinds of things that you could include in a course file. Please note though that this is for guidance only and it isn't mandatory that you include everything that's included in that file. You may wish to adapt these documents to fit in line with your own centre's way of working. It is really intended to demonstrate what basic documents could be included in the course file and what your EQAs will look for to ensure you have appropriate arrangements in place to effectively deliver and assess our qualifications. Also, within the course file documents, you'll find IQA documentation, and this includes a sampling plan template and a template for the IQA feedback to assessor. I'm now going to hand back over to Peter.
Thanks, Kelly. The internal quality assurer is your critical friend. The role is to support and offer advice and guidance to the assessor. Feedback provided by the IQA is to be directed to the assessor and not the learner. You should have an IQA sampling plan and strategy which outlines the IQA activities that you will complete over the 21 to 22 session. I'd recommend that as part of the IQA sampling plan, you sample the full grade profile to ensure consistency of the assessment descriptors across the cohort. For example, if learners have achieved level 2 pass, level 2 merit, level 2 distinction grades, select your sample to include all grades that have been achieved.
So now I'm going to talk you through the resubmission process for this session, and then Peter again will come back on to explain some of the examples for good practice for this process. As I explained at the start of the webinar, there are adaptations in place this year, and whilst IQA must still be undertaken in line with our approach to awarding and assessment, the adaptations confirm that resubmissions should be managed internally within the centre, and assessment and IQA records should be kept up to date to provide a full audit trail of the resubmission if undertaken. And the first submission grades are not to be entered onto the portal. Once learners have been given their feedback, they can have one resubmission opportunity for their Synoptic project. In this session, though learners are still to use the same Synoptic project, so they don't have to start from scratch, they can add or make changes to the previous work but they are this year permitted unlimited hours to complete their resubmission. And the learner can also use the feedback that they are given to make any improvements. Once the learners have completed their work, it would then be marked again, an internal quality assurance check would be carried out again, and a second external quality assurance visit would be arranged. So in summary, learners are to complete the Synoptic project, and as I've already said, we have removed the requirement to complete it within a set number of hours. When completed, the assessor will mark it against the grading descriptors and fill in the grading calculator. The IQA will then check the work and provide feedback to the assessor. Learners are then given their feedback and are permitted to a resubmission opportunity if applicable, but again, this is to be managed internally by the centre. Grades for a learner's first submission do not need to be entered onto the portal, but assessment records should be kept up to date to provide a full audit trail. The final resubmission grades are to be submitted to the portal by the 27th of May 2022, and the EQA review deadline is to be conducted before the 31st of July 2022. The EQA will then check the work and either agree the grading decision and bank the grades or reject the grading decisions.
Thanks, Kelly. I now would like to talk you through some best practice tips. Maintaining your tracker and assessment records to evidence first and final submission grades throughout the year. Keep your IQA in the loop. Have them attend your standardisation events and gain agreement on the marks you are awarding. Maintain written IQA logs to evidence decisions made and discussions held.
Now I'd like to talk you through submitting your grades to the portal. You can submit unit grades by selecting grading and then submit unit grades from the portal menu. You can search for your learners to submit unit grades using batch, forename, surname, centre learner reference or the NCFE learner number. Click to select the learners that you would like to submit grades for. Please do note though that unit grades should only be submitted once the work has been assessed and a sample has been internally quality assured. Once this has been done, you are then able to submit the applicable grades for each learner. The unit grades will be stored until your EQA banks them following a successful quality assurance review. Please do check the information you're about to submit is correct, as once the grades are submitted, you are unable to make any further amendments. Select the learners that you would like to submit grades for and select Next. When you select a unit, you get the option to select a grade for each learner. When you have finished selecting grades, tick the declaration and complete the full name of your IQA before selecting Submit. Confirmation of successful unit grade submission will then show. I do recommend that you save or print a copy of this screen for your records. If at any point you do require any further support, we do have the portal support user guide, which is available on QualHub, or you can contact our customer support team on 0191 239 8000 or by email at customersupport@ncfe.org.uk.
Here is some guidance to make the process easier for you. Learners have the opportunity to complete resubmissions. This will be managed internally by you and the learners have completed all work and achieved their final grade. This will be entered into the portal and the EQA review can take place. The EQA review will sample a cross-section of the grades achieved by your learners from level 1 class up to level 2 distinction. The sample will be sent to your EQA electronically, normally before the review takes place. The sample can only be sent when the final grades are submitted onto the portal. Grades sampled will be across all teaching staff and all grades. I'm now going to talk you through EQA reviews and support we have available. The final stage is the external quality assurance check. On QualHub, in the Delivery and Learner Support tab, we have a selection of documents regarding EQA reviews, which you may want to view to help prepare. If you have already registered your learners, then you will have been assigned your EQA and should have had contact from them already this academic year. You're entitled to 2 free reviews or visits from your EQA, and it's worth contacting them so that you can arrange your visit, as many have started booking in appointments already and they fill up very quickly. These visits might be in person or they may still be remote. Watch this space. There are some key things that the EQA will be checking: your internal quality assurance process, a sample of portfolios to check your assessment decisions. They may want to check your schemes of work as well. It can include wider aspects such as policies, CPD records, and staff CVs. In terms of Synoptic project, the IQA process and assessment decisions will be the most important. You will need to have the learner work available for EQA to check. They will either agree with your assessment decisions and the grade submitted will be backed, or they will reject your grades. And this can be from grading too harshly as well as too leniently. The EQA will have a decision with you, give you some actions via a very supportive action plan, and then the new grades will be backed for those learners. If grades are changed by the EQA, this does not affect the learner's capacity to resubmit. After the EQA review, feedback can be given to learners and they are entitled to 1 resubmission. Samples can only be sent when final grades are submitted via the portal, grade profile submitted, and EQA support. After the EQA review has taken place, you receive an EQA report, which will formally document the outcome of the review. You can download your EQA report from the previous session. This can be downloaded from the NCFE portal. You can search for a visit report by selecting Search, then Visit Reports. You can view all of your centre's visits by selecting All in the visit type. Alternatively, you can refine your search by selecting a visit type from the list available by entering a specific product code, product name, session, and/or visit date. You can also find your EQA contact, your EQA name, and the report, selecting the PDF. Review EQA report from previous session where you are set any actions or provided with any recommendations that will support your delivery. Section 9 will detail any actions or recommendations set in sections 3, 4, and 6 of the report. Actions are mandatory. Recommendations are suggested to take into consideration. They are optional. After the EQA review has taken place, you receive the EQA report, which will be a formal document of the outcome of the review.
Thanks, Peter, for that. So lastly now, I'm going to talk you through what I think is the best bit, certifying your learners and how you can claim your learner certificates on the portal. So now that the Synoptic project has been completed, learners will, I'm sure, be eagerly waiting for their certificates. And certificates can be claimed when they have achieved a grade for the external assessment and they have a banked grade for their Synoptic project. For 2021-22, or this academic session, the EQA review deadline must be conducted before the 31st of July. The portal user guide does also contain details and further information and support on submitting grades, viewing results, and certification. But I will talk a little bit more about this in more detail on the next slide. So you can make a certificate claim for your learners by selecting certification from the portal menu and clicking the Make a Claim option. Alternatively, you can select the Claim My Certificates option from the portal homepage. You will be taken to the results search page. Here you can search for the learners by batch number, product code, product name, forename, surname, or date of birth. If you do require further options, you can select Advance, and options to search on that you can use are Centre Learner Number, the NCFE Learner Number, the ULN, Centre Reference Number, and so on, and that you can search on one or more of these options. Your search results will then show. You then select the learners that you would like to claim certificates for and click Submit. When claiming certificates for all our VCERT qualifications, your selected learners will then show. Your learners will be displayed with a new claim status. This is automatically calculated and will show as full or partial, depending on which units have had grades banked for them. The grade is the overall grade that the learner has achieved, so they have achieved enough units for a full certificate. If you select a learner, you can see the grades for each unit that has been banked. If you don't wish to claim for a learner at this time, you can remove them from the claim by selecting the Remove Learner from the Claim icon. You must confirm the address that you would like the certificate sending to and then select Claim. As a footnote, if you would like a purchase order number to show on any certification orders, then you can complete this in this section also. You then review your claim before it's finalised. It is worth checking that you have claimed all the units that the learner has achieved and that the expected status is showing correctly. You can then view the claimed units by selecting Learner Units, and if you need to make any amendments, select Return to Claim before proceeding. Otherwise, select Claim Certificates to submit your. So we do have the question box functionality. So if you would like to pop any of your questions in there as to maybe what the questions that you might have in relation to why your confidence scores have reduced to a 5 to 6, and myself and Peter then are around to help answer those. So if you do want to ask any of your questions, you can use the question box on your GoToWebinar panel. If you don't have any questions at this point, please do feel free to contact your EQA. And again, I will just remind you that you do need to have had your learners registered to be allocated your EQA. If, like me, you think of questions after you've had a chance to digest all the information given today, then please do feel free to contact me on my email at kellyjohnson@ncfe.org.uk. And if I am unavailable, you can contact provider.development@ncfe.org.uk. I also on here just wanted to include some of the useful links that you can refer to if you do require further information and support. And these links do include our approach to awarding and assessment, the adaptation blueprint, and the quality assurance policy. I will continue to remain on the webinar if you do have any questions, but if you don't, please feel free to leave the webinar. And when you do leave the webinar, I'd really appreciate it if you could complete the short evaluation survey that pops up to help us make any future improvements and/or changes to the service and support that we provide. If you are feeling now that you're ready to leave the webinar, I would like to take this opportunity to thank Peter for his invaluable support on the webinar today, and thanks to everyone for listening. And I hope it's been beneficial, and on behalf of everyone here at NCFE, we do wish you a continued safe and successful year.